In this video, I will put forth the theory, by the end of the Song of Ice and Fire, House Tarly will ascend to Lords Paramount of the Reach. The catalyst for this change is likely the destruction of House Tyrell by the Lannisters, particularly Cersei. It will either be by using Lannister forces, or what's more probable, orchestrating the seat change, similar to the Crown naming Peter Baelish Lord Paramount of the Triton, and Tywin's masterminding of the Red Wedding Massacre with the assistance of the Freys and the Flayed Men. After all, the Tyrells were appointed by the Targaryens during the conquest, but more on that later. For what can be made can be unmade. Now turning to Randyll Tarly, who's been recently raised to Master of Laws by Kevan Lannister, now Lord Regent. Kevan believes Randyll is a dangerous man. Such are ambitious men, just as Peter Baelish. So why do you think Randyll Tarly married a Florent? Well, let's first turn to the possible opening for House Tarly's ascension, the fractious Tyrell and Lannister alliance, which in the show has already reached its explosive crescendo. The alliance was essential during the early phases of the War of the Five Kings, as it removed a potential combatant and bind them to the Lannister cause. It allowed a much larger Lannister and Tyrell force to march on King's Landing in time to save the city and King Joffrey. Consequently, Stannis' forces were routed when the relief force took them unaware. With Stannis' defeat and the absorption of many of the surrounding Reach and Stormland lords, the Lannisters now possessed superior numbers in the field among the belligerents, bringing the War of the Five Kings closer to its end. Now with some of their external threats abated, Cersei can shift her focus on stemming the growing influence of the Tyrells, particularly Marjorie's influence on Joffrey and later Tommen. If you recall, the alliance was sealed with the marriage pact to join their houses, thereby ending Sansa's betrothal and beginning Marjorie's. However, King Joffrey was poisoned during his wedding feast and died. But the two houses were finally joined when Joffrey's brother, now King Tommen, married Marjorie. For the Tyrells, Marjorie's ascension to queen is just one more step taken for the Tyrells' climb to the top and to secure their position in the realm. Before I go further, a quick history of the Tyrells. Like many houses of the Reach, they can trace their lineage to Garth Greenhand, the legendary first king of the Reach. According to legend, he was the High King of the First Men who led them across the Arm of Dorne. For thousands of years, Garth Greenhand's sons and grandsons ruled the Reach as House Gardener until their line was extinguished in the Field of Fire during Aegon's conquest. Subsequently, House Tyrell, who served the Gardeners as stewards, promptly surrendered High Garden to Aegon without further conflict. Thus Aegon rewarded Harlan Tyrell by giving the Tyrells dominion over the Reach and raised them to Lords of Highgarden, Lord Paramount of the Manor, and Warden of the South, over older and greater houses of the Reach, like the Florents. However, the Lannisters have a history of dealing with rivals, just as the reigns of Castamere. Now the following is an excerpt from Season 3, Episode 4 of Game of Thrones. House Reynes was a powerful family, very wealthy, the second wealthiest in Westeros. Aren't the Tyrells the second wealthiest family in Westeros now? Of course, all ambitious climbers do not want to stop on the second highest rung. If only they can take that final step, you will see further than all the rest. You will be alone with nothing but blue sky above you. So Lord Reynes built a castle as grand as Castle Rock. He gave us white diamonds larger than any of my mother ever wore. And finally, one day, he rebelled against my father, and do you know where House Reyne is now? Gone. A gentle word, let's say slaughtered. Every man, woman, and child put to the sword. And now the Reynes, we reap their hall, and not a soul to hear. A more recent example is Tywin's dispatching of the Starks through orchestrating the Red Wedding with the Boltons and the Freys, knocking the Starks out of the War of the Five Kings, and leaving them near extinction, with Arya, Bran, and Rickon presumed dead. Sansa is the last known member of the Stark line, and she was married off to Tyrion Lannister before Joffrey's royal court. But let's put a pin in it now. So the Lannisters have a long history of eliminating their foes, and Cersei intends to do the same with the Tyrells. In the show, she has already carried out a coup, eradicating her enemies and becoming queen, once again. Since the Tyrells are effectively gone, it provides an opening for the Tarlys to be granted the regency of the Reach. But in the books, Varys arranges a coup to restore Cersei as Creed regent by killing Pycelle and Kevan Lannister, effectively reversing his efforts to reconcile Highgarden and Castle Rock, the Fae, to the Little King, and unite the Seven Kingdoms under Tommen. And sowing suspicion in the kingdom. Cersei will suspect the Tyrells. The Tyrells will suspect her. And it's only a matter of time until someone, somewhere, will find a way to blame the Dornishmen, paving the way for Varys to install Aegon onto the Iron Throne. The Tarlys are in a perfect position to be raised as Lords Paramount of the Mandar and Wardens of the South by Cersei, similar to how the Tyrells were elevated by the Targaryens during the conquest to bring the Reach swiftly under heel. In the show, the vacancy has already been provided with the wildfire explosion at the Great Sept at Baelor. At least in the short term, Lady Olenna will wield greater influence over the Tyrells, even though she was already the de facto head of the house. Alternatively, in the books, the Tyrells are in jeopardy, but not extinguished. So Lawrence is gravely injured while foolishly assaulting Dragonstone. And Queen Margaery awaits trial by the Fae, but is released to Randyll Tarly's custody, after he swore a holy oath to return her for trial. During Cersei's arrest, Kevan Lannister was named Lord Regent and began taking steps to undo the damage which Cersei has caused by making Mace Tyrell Hand of the King, Paxter Redwyne, the Master of Ships, and Randyll Tarly, Master of Laws and Justicar. Earlier in the Feast for Crows, Kevan once advised Cersei to name Randyll Hand of the King, as he is one of the finest soldiers in the realm. A poor hand in peacetime, but with Tywin's death, there's no better man to finish this war. Furthermore, the move would place a powerful Tyrell bannerman in a position of higher authority than the Warden of the South. It would strengthen the crown while weakening Highgarden. It will likely pass unopposed. With Cersei's return as Queen Regent, her paranoia will reach new heights, especially with Kevan's Tyrell-dominated small council. She will likely remove many of these members, except for Randyll, who made himself valuable by securing Margaery in his custody. He is a very shrewd, ambitious, and iron-willed individual. I liken him to Tywin, but who wasn't born to a great house. Which brings us to my previous statement. Why do you think Randyll Tarly married a Florent? The answer is to marry into a name who has a better claim, in this case for the Reach. It is early foreshadowing to a solution for another character with questionable lineage. Randyll has previously attempted to cultivate connections within the Reach, which is why he sent Samwell to the Arbor to serve as Lord Paxter page and squire, in hopes he will please him and betroth his daughter to Samwell. In a way, it would be the joining of the Reach's army and navy. However, that did not come to pass, as well as Randyll's many attempts to butch up Sam. He recognizes any further attempts to advance his house would be hampered as long as Samwell is his heir. When Dickon showed more physical aptitude, he shifted his efforts in making him his proper heir. When Sam reached maturity, he told him to join the Night's Watch, disinheriting himself or he would have an unfortunate hunting accident. So saying Randyll is an uncompromising figure is to put it lightly, for his ultimate goal is to rule over the Reach. Even at this stage of the series, their world is filled with plenty of ambitious climbers. At this conjunction, Randyll has Margaery and her cousins. Cersei is Queen Regent again after Kevan's and Pycelle's assassination. Her paranoia and wrath will reach new heights without a moment's thought. But soon, she'll have a moment of clarity on her proper course of action. For even a broken clock is right twice a day. She will raise House Tarly as Lord Paramount of the Mandar to gain his loyalty. And for Cersei, she robs the Reach of their finest military commander, who defeated Robert Baratheon at the Battle of Ashford, giving him his only defeat in the rebellion. Additionally, Randyll will be able to bring the Reach swiftly under heel, as it is one less front Cersei has to contend with, while Jon Connington's forces are landing in the Stormlands. While all of these events are going on, the spark that might kick this tinderbox off could be the reveal that Olenna poisoned Joffrey, especially when Littlefinger's and Lady Olenna's alliance has ran its course and no longer mutually beneficial. Which leads us to the supernatural part of our video and its links to the overall theory of this channel. Remember the High Sparrow's line during Joffrey and Margaery's wedding, "Cursed be he who tells them asunder." Olenna's poisoning of Joffrey could be loosely considered kinslaying, for they are kin through marriage. No one is so accursed as the kinslayer by the old gods and the new. One facet why the gods abhor kinslayers, because they tamper with the line of succession. The consequences of such action is a loss of protection or one's favor with the gods. Here's a looking at you, Robb Stark. When Rickard Karstark was executed by Robb Stark instead of holding him as a captive, after he executed 2 Lannister hostages, Robb's overall protection was diminished, while he underutilized his personal protection, Grey Wind. In addition, Melisandre and Stannis used blood magic to put claims on the lives of 3 false kings, Robb Stark, Balon Greyjoy, and Joffrey Baratheon. And in time, all of them met their demise, leading us to the other use of blood magic in the Storm of Swords. And it's not Targaryen or their distant kin, the Baratheons, but the Florents, particularly Alliser Florent, Samwell Tarly's maternal grandfather, who was sacrificed for favorable winds in Stannis' expedition to Eastwatch. Here it is important to remember the special attention paid to the matrilineal lines of the first men, because, like Alliser, the blood of the first king of the first men who brought them into Westeros flows through Samwell's veins as well. With that in mind, there's a new importance in the scene where Sam and Jon take their oaths before a heart tree, as well as his taking up of the old gods. So there is an additional facet to Samwell's protection, as Bloodraven is protecting their counterparty in the Children of the Forest's covenant with the first men. Yes, one could say most of the Reach can trace their line to Garth Greenhand, but like the Redwynes, the Oakhearts, and the Florents. So what makes Samwell so special? Well, he's part Florents, but above all, he took up worship of the old gods. In effect, returning their lineage back to the old gods. He is Bloodraven's chosen to assist Jon in his task to assemble the army to defeat the Great Other. For example, he manipulated the Night's Watch Lord Commander election so Jon Snow would win. Samwell played 2 factions, Cutter Pike and Sir Mallister, off each other to convince them to support Jon for Lord Commander, allowing Jon to be in the position to invite the free folk south of the Wall, the opening step to unite the first men against the others. But moreover, Samwell would probably be responsible for bringing over Randall, therefore the Reach, to Jon's cause. So in effect, Randall's endeavors will grant the Tarlys a Reach, but Samwell's endeavors will allow them to keep it. One could think of it as a reward for aiding Jon to forge Lightbringer, the Red Sword of Heroes. Thanks for watching. Next time, a video on the Riverlands.